Brock Lesnar just ended Bron Breakker's career, and WWE is in absolute meltdown mode right now because their golden boy, their handpicked future champion, just got obliterated by the Beast incarnate in what might be the most vicious and unnecessary beatdown in WWE history. If you think I'm exaggerating, you clearly haven't seen the footage that WWE is desperately trying to keep off the internet. This isn't just another return storyline or some carefully orchestrated comeback. This was a legitimate assault that has left Bron Breakker hospitalized and WWE executives questioning everything they thought they knew about Brock Lesnar's mental state. The man who was supposed to be their next big thing is now fighting for his wrestling career, and it's all because WWE made the worst decision in company history by bringing back their most dangerous and unpredictable superstar. But here's what's going to make your blood absolutely boil. Brock Lesnar wasn't even supposed to be at the arena tonight. His return was supposed to be a surprise for next week's show, but he showed up early, saw Bron Breakker backstage, and something in his brain just snapped. What happened next was pure, unfiltered violence that had nothing to do with entertainment and everything to do with a psychopath finally revealing his true nature. And before you even think about scrolling away, let me tell you something that will change everything you thought you knew about this situation. I have exclusive footage from multiple angles, backstage reports from terrified WWE personnel, and medical information that proves this attack was so brutal that Breakker might never be the same again. WWE is threatening lawsuits to keep this information buried, which is exactly why you need to smash that like button and share this video before they succeed in their cover-up. The sheer brutality of what Lesnar did to Breakker defies description, but I'm going to try because the wrestling world needs to know exactly what kind of monster WWE has been enabling for years. This wasn't a wrestling move or a storyline beatdown, this was attempted murder disguised as sports entertainment, and the fact that WWE officials just stood there and watched it happen makes them complicit in this atrocity. Let me paint you the picture of the most disturbing scene in modern wrestling history, because what you're about to hear will haunt you for weeks. Bron Breakker was in catering, just finished with his workout, completely relaxed and unsuspecting when Brock Lesnar appeared like something out of a horror movie. No music, no announcement, no warning, just pure predatory stalking followed by an explosion of violence that caught everyone off guard. The first thing Lesnar did was grab Breakker by the throat and slam him through a catering table with such force that the sound echoed throughout the entire backstage area. But that was just the beginning of this nightmare. While Breakker was still dazed and covered in food debris, Lesnar started delivering German suplexes on the concrete floor, not one, not two, but 7 consecutive German suplexes that had medical personnel screaming for security. But here's where it gets absolutely sickening. When security finally arrived to stop the attack, Brock Lesnar grabbed one of the security guards and F5'd him through a nearby equipment case. This maniac was so consumed with violence that he was attacking innocent bystanders who were just trying to do their jobs and protect another human being from serious injury. The medical staff rushed to check on both Breakker and the injured security guard while Lesnar just stood there with this twisted smile on his face, like he was enjoying the carnage he had created. Multiple witnesses described the look in his eyes as completely vacant and terrifyingly calm. This wasn't passion or anger, this was cold, calculated brutality from someone who was completely lost touch with reality. WWE officials were running around in complete panic, trying to figure out how to handle a situation that had spiraled completely out of control. They had no protocol for dealing with one of their biggest stars going completely insane and attacking people at random. The chaos backstage was unlike anything anyone had ever seen, with talent and crew members literally hiding from Brock Lesnar because nobody knew who he might target next. But what makes this entire situation even more infuriating is that WWE had warning signs about Lesnar's deteriorating mental state for months and chose to ignore them. Multiple sources have told me that his behavior during recent contract negotiations was erratic and concerning, with reports of violent outbursts and threats against WWE personnel that were covered up to protect the company's image. The medical evaluation of Bron Breakker revealed injuries so severe that doctors initially thought he might have suffered permanent spinal damage. We're talking about a young man whose entire future was just destroyed by a psychopath who couldn't control his violent impulses. The preliminary reports mentioned possible herniated discs, severe concussion symptoms, and internal injuries that required emergency surgery. And where was Paul Heyman during all of this? Where was the man who's supposed to be Lesnar's advocate and voice of reason? He was nowhere to be found when his client was destroying careers and endangering lives. This proves that Heyman's entire relationship with Lesnar is just a business arrangement. When things get real, when lives are on the line, he disappears like the coward he is. The footage of this attack is so disturbing that several WWE employees who witnessed it have requested psychological counseling. These are people who work in the wrestling business, who are used to seeing staged violence and dramatic storylines, and they were traumatized by what Brock Lesnar did to Bron Breakker. That should tell you everything you need to know about the severity of this incident. WWE's initial response was to try and control the narrative by claiming this was a worked shoot or some kind of elaborate storyline, but the medical bills and legal ramifications prove otherwise. You can't fake the kind of injuries that Breakker sustained, and you can't script the terror that was visible on everyone's faces during the attack. The company is now facing potential lawsuits from multiple parties: Breaker's family, the injured security guard, and possibly even their own employees who were put in danger by WWE's negligence in allowing Lesnar backstage without proper supervision. This single incident could cost them millions in legal fees and settlements. But here's what really exposes WWE's priorities: instead of immediately firing Brock Lesnar and banning him from all WWE properties, they're in crisis management mode, trying to figure out how to salvage his character and protect their investment. They care more about the money Lesnar generates than the safety of their other performers. The backstage reaction to this incident has been universally negative, with several top stars reportedly demanding increased security and refusing to work with Lesnar in any capacity. The locker room culture that Triple H has been trying to build is completely shattered because nobody feels safe when a legitimate psychopath has access to the building. One veteran wrestler, speaking on condition of anonymity, told me that the attack on Breaker was the most disturbing thing they've ever witnessed in decades of being in the business. This is coming from someone who's seen everything the wrestling world has to offer, and they're saying this incident stands alone in terms of pure brutality and senseless violence. The timing of this attack is also incredibly suspicious when you consider that Bron Breakker was being positioned as WWE's next big babyface star. Was this really just a random outburst from Lesnar, or was there something more calculated about targeting the company's rising star? The circumstances suggest this wasn't as spontaneous as WWE wants us to believe. Think about it: Lesnar shows up unannounced, goes straight to catering where he knows Breakker will be after his workout, and launches an attack that seems designed to end a career rather than just send a message. This has all the hallmarks of premeditation, which makes it even more disturbing and criminal. The legal implications of this incident are massive, and WWE's lawyers are working overtime to try and minimize their liability. But how do you explain away video footage of one of your contractors attempting to seriously injure another contractor on company property? How do you spin that as entertainment when real medical emergencies were involved? Bron Breakker's family is reportedly exploring all legal options, including criminal charges against Brock Lesnar for assault and battery. They're also considering a massive civil lawsuit against WWE for negligence, creating an unsafe work environment, and failing to protect their son from a known dangerous individual. The medical experts I've consulted about Breakker's injuries paint a grim picture of his recovery timeline. We're potentially looking at months of rehabilitation, extensive physical therapy, and the very real possibility that he might never be able to compete at the same level again. One spinal specialist told me that the type of damage Breakker sustained often leads to chronic pain and mobility issues that last a lifetime. But let's talk about the real Brock Lesnar, because WWE has been hiding his true nature from the public for years. This attack on Bron Breakker isn't an isolated incident, it's the culmination of years of increasingly erratic and violent behavior that WWE has covered up to protect their cash cow. Multiple sources have told me about previous incidents involving Lesnar that never made it to the public eye. There was the time he allegedly attacked a catering worker who accidentally spilled coffee on him, resulting in a significant financial settlement and a non-disclosure agreement. There was the incident with a cameraman who got too close during a backstage segment, leading to injuries that required surgery. The pattern is clear: Brock Lesnar has been using his status and WWE's protection to abuse people with impunity, and the company has been enabling this behavior by covering it up and paying off victims. What happened to Bron Breakker was inevitable when you create an environment where violence is rewarded and accountability doesn't exist. WWE's wellness policy is supposedly designed to identify and help talent who might be struggling with issues that could affect their performance or behavior. But somehow, Brock Lesnar's obvious psychological problems have been completely ignored while they focus on drug testing lower-level talent for marijuana usage. The double standard is absolutely disgusting. If any other wrestler had done what Lesnar did to Breakker, they would have been fired immediately and possibly arrested. But because Lesnar generates revenue and has a special relationship with Vince McMahon and the company executives, he gets special treatment even when he commits what amounts to attempted murder. The trauma that Bron Breakker experienced during this attack goes far beyond just physical injuries. The psychological impact of being brutally assaulted by someone you trusted, someone who was supposed to be a colleague and mentor figure in the business, creates lasting damage that might never fully heal. Sports psychologists who specialize in trauma recovery have told me that victims of workplace violence often struggle with PTSD, anxiety disorders, and depression that can affect every aspect of their lives. Breakker's wrestling career might be the least of his concerns as he deals with the mental and emotional aftermath of this assault. Meanwhile, Brock Lesnar is probably at home right now, completely unbothered by the destruction he's caused, planning his next violent outburst while WWE executives figure out how to spin this disaster into a profitable storyline. The man has no conscience, no empathy, and no understanding of the pain he's inflicted on an innocent young wrestler. The fan reaction to this incident has been swift and overwhelmingly negative, with thousands of wrestling fans calling for Lesnar's immediate termination and criminal prosecution. Social media is flooded with messages of support for Bron Breakker and demands for justice that WWE can't ignore forever. But WWE is betting that the wrestling community's short attention span will allow them to weather this storm without making any real changes. They're hoping that a few weeks of controversy will blow over and they can go back to booking Lesnar in main event matches like nothing happened. That's exactly why we need to keep this story alive and keep demanding answers. Every share, every comment, every angry tweet sends a message that the wrestling community won't tolerate this kind of behavior from WWE or their performers. We have the power to force change, but only if we stay united and keep the pressure on. The investigation into this incident needs to be conducted by law enforcement rather than WWE's internal security team. There are too many conflicts of interest and too much at stake for the company to investigate itself fairly. Criminal charges need to be filed, and Lesnar needs to face real consequences for his actions. The precedent this sets for the wrestling business is terrifying if WWE is allowed to sweep it under the rug. If superstars can commit violent assaults on their coworkers without consequences, it creates an environment where everyone is at risk and nobody is safe. Young wrestlers coming up through the system are watching how WWE handles this situation, and their decision will determine whether future generations of talent feel safe pursuing careers in sports entertainment. Do we want a wrestling business where might makes right and violence is rewarded, or do we demand better standards and accountability? The medical bills alone from this incident are going to be staggering. Bron Breakker's emergency surgery, ongoing rehabilitation, and potential long-term care costs could easily reach hundreds of thousands of dollars. Who's going to pay for that, the victim or the company that failed to protect him? WWE's insurance company is probably demanding answers about how they allowed a known volatile individual to have unsupervised access to their facilities and personnel. The liability exposure from this incident could affect their coverage and dramatically increase their premiums for years to come. But beyond the financial costs, there's the human cost that can never be fully calculated. A young man's dreams and aspirations have been crushed by senseless violence. A family has to watch their son suffer through a recovery process that might never fully restore him to who he was before the attack. The ripple effects of this incident are already being felt throughout the wrestling industry. Independent promoters are questioning whether they want to book anyone associated with WWE's toxic culture. Other major promotions are using this incident to highlight their commitment to wrestler safety and professional conduct. Talent agents are advising their clients to demand additional safety clauses in their WWE contracts, assuming they're willing to work for the company at all after seeing how they handle incidents like this. The long-term damage to WWE's reputation as a safe place to work could affect their ability to attract top talent for years. The media coverage of this incident has been disappointingly minimal, with most wrestling outlets either ignoring it completely or presenting sanitized versions that don't capture the true horror of what happened. This is exactly why independent wrestling journalism is crucial. Someone needs to tell the truth when corporate interests try to suppress it. Major sports networks that usually cover WWE extensively have been suspiciously quiet about this story. Are they afraid of losing access to WWE programming, or have they been pressured to minimize coverage of an incident that reflects poorly on their business partner? The silence from other WWE superstars has been deafening and revealing. Where are the locker room leaders speaking out against this violence? Where are the veterans who claim to care about the business and the next generation of talent? Their silence makes them complicit in enabling this kind of behavior. You would expect wrestlers who pride themselves on being tough competitors to be outraged by an unprovoked attack on one of their own. But instead, we get complete radio silence because they're all afraid of becoming Lesnar's next target or losing favor with WWE management. The only people showing any courage in this situation are the medical personnel who risked their own safety to help Bron Breakker and the witnesses who provided information about what really happened. Everyone else is either covering their own ass or actively participating in the cover-up. WWE's social media team has been working overtime to suppress discussion of this incident, using their influence to get posts removed and accounts suspended if they share footage or detailed information about the attack. They're using the same tactics that authoritarian governments use to control information and suppress dissent. The fact that they're putting so much effort into controlling the narrative tells you everything you need to know about how damaging this incident really is. If it were just a storyline or a minor altercation, they wouldn't need to mount such an extensive cover-up campaign, but the truth has a way of coming out regardless of how hard powerful people try to suppress it. The wrestling community is resourceful and determined, and we won't let Bron Breakker's assault be forgotten or minimized just because it's inconvenient for WWE's business interests. The security footage from multiple cameras captured every moment of this brutal attack, and despite WWE's efforts to suppress it, copies exist that could potentially be released if the company continues to avoid accountability. The visual evidence is so damning that it would immediately end any debate about whether this was entertainment or assault. Hospital records, medical reports, and witness statements all paint the same picture. This was a vicious, unprovoked attack that had nothing to do with professional wrestling and everything to do with one man's inability to control his violent impulses. No amount of corporate spin can change those facts. The psychological profile of someone who commits this type of assault is deeply concerning. Experts in criminal psychology have told me that unprovoked workplace violence often escalates over time, meaning that if Lesnar faces no consequences for this attack, his future victims could suffer even worse injuries. WWE has created a monster by enabling Brock Lesnar's violent tendencies and protecting him from consequences for years. Now that monster has turned on one of their own rising stars, and they're scrambling to figure out how to contain the damage without admitting their role in creating this situation. The corporate culture at WWE that allows this kind of behavior to flourish needs to be completely dismantled and rebuilt from the ground up. As long as revenue generation is prioritized over human safety, incidents like this will continue to happen and innocent people will continue to suffer. The wrestling business has always had a complicated relationship with real versus staged violence, but there has to be a clear line that cannot be crossed. What Brock Lesnar did to Bron Breakker crossed every possible line and end.